Well, good morning, everybody. And I hope my voice is loud enough to wake you up, or that you've had that second cup of coffee by now, because we need your energy and we need your enthusiasm. I want to welcome you to the 2021 version of Yacht Sales and the Law, a very popular seminar that we do as part of the overall education process that IYBA presents. I want to congratulate each and every one of you for being here today. It's a comment about your professionalism, but it's also a commitment to attending a live seminar. I think Paul is the first one in about 18 months that we've had, so it's fantastic. We're in here in person, and isn't it great, actually, to be here in person? I'm Bob Saxon. I'm president of your association, IYBA, as well as director of sales at Westport Yachts. And we are here on the, not quite the eve, but nearly the eve of the Fort Lauderdale Boat Show, with International Boat Show with all of its pizzazz. And if recent history says anything, such as Monaco, I think we're in for a whirlwind of activity. Demand is outsizing supply, as we well know, which only further serves to stimulate the buying juices a little bit. If they know that the inventory is limited, they're going to be jumping up in their prices a little bit, I think. So, in my 40 years of being in the management and sales and charter segments of our industry, I will say that I've never seen a market as we are seeing right now. And if you're not making money, if you're not flourishing in this market, you might want to reconsider your business plan or your business profile, because it is crazy out there right now. And I want to first give an acknowledgement to our sponsors. What's great about our sponsors is that not only are they here for great exposure that helps stimulate their own businesses as well, but there's something unique about our sponsors, and that they are here because they believe in the IYBA mission. The IYBA mission is to promote professionalism within our industry and to generate business activity within our constituency. So our sponsors include, and I'm not going to go into great detail on any of the sponsors because those notes are there in your packets. At the same time, when you hear their name, you're going to recognize that not only are they great supporters of IYBA, but you'll recognize their industry prominence as well. First of all, Maass, Rogers, and Lindsay. We'll hear more from them later today, but you know the role that they play with IYBA, such as Willis, Towers, and Watson as well. Great insurance folks. Robert Allen Law, a great supporter of IYBA. Yachtworld, whom we all know. Lauderdale Marine Center has stepped up and is sponsoring this event as well. And then the International Yacht Arbitration Council, which you'll hear from later on well, I'm not even going to get into it. I'm just going to let the drama build up as the suspense builds up, and we talk about an actual arbitration case, okay, that came up. And then we have boatdocs.org, which you'll hear about as well later on. Now, format, we're going to have 4 20-minute updates where you'll hear from various industry notables on subjects of critical importance. I'm going to let you go to break, depending on where we are time-wise, somewhere around 10:30 to 10:45, so you can plan your cell phone or whatever you need to do in that 15-minute period. We'll then have a 90-minute session on a variety of subjects with a star-studded panel, which will be discussion led by Rob Maass. And then we go to lunch somewhere in the neighborhood of 12:15. We would only ask that whatever time we go to lunch, it's going to be a 1-hour deal. So kind of plan your lunch that way and be back here as possible so that we can stay on track, because my job is sort of like a parliamentarian, a sergeant of arms for you to keep us on track time-wise and so on, so we get in and get out of here. From 1:15 to 3:15, we have a real treat for you as the IYBA low tide, not ready for any time, much less prime time players, present the stages of arbitration with a return to the still silver screen of Bill Boatwise and Bubba Calhoun, as David Maass takes us on a real-life journey, and not a real-life journey, but nearly a real-life journey, through an arbitration with an all-star panel of which I am a participant. So don't miss it if you can. We'll break after that, and then our closing session on boat docs, and then we have a really interesting keynote address on cryptocurrency, which should be of interest to you, because I know some firms have already announced that they are accepting crypto, and there are deals being done on that basis as well. So that should be fascinating. And then we'll conclude happily and gracefully with our cocktail hour networking. One thing I want to mention is you should have in your packets these pink sheets. So make notes on those. Those are the templates. Those are the blueprints for where we go in the future with future seminars. We're looking for ideas. We're looking for reactions from you. in terms of helping us plan our future seminars. And then we have, I don't know what the Wi-Fi situation is. I won't even mention it, but I'll just leave it at that. I'll find out from Emma what that's all about. And then CLE, some of you are here for CLE. Make sure you sign in with the CLE sheet out front. And then also Emma asked me to mention that CPYB sign-in sheets, you just don't sign in, but you sign out at the end of the day so we know that you're not playing hooky, okay, and all that stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I will just simply say I'd like to introduce you the Executive Director of the International Yacht Brokers Association, Mr. Paul Flannery.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Bob probably wasn't here in June when we had the Yacht Sales Summit, but I seem to remember having the pleasure of everybody being in the room. And we inconspicuously forgot to mention AMI Kids. Thank you, Roger, for your support as well. Welcome, everybody. It is really nice to be back in the room with people enjoying some educational opportunities, some networking, some camaraderie. We've had an interesting time. Fortunately, the board of directors has been very supportive of rising to the challenges that COVID presented and shifting gears so that we could bring educational content to the membership through the course of COVID. We did, I'd say, maybe 40 webinars. We've actually changed our focus on Yacht Engineering Week to be an online product. Lee Savage with Between Two Yetis has been instrumental in making us look professional, that and a lot of makeup. We've got really good content coming together for next year's Yacht Engineering Week, and you'll see that in April as a 5-day event, an hour and a half each morning, hour and a half to 2 hours each morning. And the reason we do that is because it gives us the ability to bring a much greater depth of content to you and a much better learning experience. Our seminar schedule for next year will be similar to years past. We'll have our June Yacht Sales Summit, our West Coast Yacht Sales Summit in August. Unfortunately, we had to cancel that this year because there was a flare-up of the Delta variant. We just didn't really think it'd be a good idea for IYBA to be the scene of a petri dish in Sarasota. So we shut that one down, but we're able to come back for Yacht Sales and the Law here today. We'll also add next year, we'll revisit something that we did in 2019, and that is a 2-day event in Monaco with new build and refit on one day and yacht sales, charter, and the law on the other day. So our seminar schedule, provided the CDC doesn't go crazy on us, we don't have any other unforeseen surprises, we'll be back on track with our regular schedule. I want to start out by thanking, and Emma isn't even in the room, but the staff at IYBA is absolutely amazing. I am truly blessed to have the ability to work with Emma Ross, Rayut Masre, and Ketra Ferda. Kevin Dobson and Wendy Dobson, none of you know because they don't work here in the Fort Lauderdale office, they work remotely. Kevin works as our controller, and Wendy has joined us to take over Compass Magazine. We've got a wonderful staff. They're the ones that provide the ability to do all of this. I simply have ideas, ask them to do it, and they do a really great job of executing. So thank you very much to them. Thank you to the board of directors. Bob is our president. Our vice presidents are Gary Smith and Grant Henderson, who I think both are in the room. Treasurer is Jeff Stanley. He's out counting the money right now. And secretary is Trevor Carroll. Trevor went to the Bahamas to celebrate his dad's birthday. Board members that I saw in the room this morning are John Burkhardt, Mike Scalisi, Andy Miles, and Bob Dennison snuck in. Hello, Bob. Good morning. Other board members are Chuck Cashman, James Courts, and I know I'm missing one. When I think of it, I'll tell you who it is. No, I mentioned Scalisi. So our board is really what makes it all work. These guys give an awful lot of time. They dedicate a lot of effort. And the really interesting thing, you've heard it from us before, when they enter the room for the board meetings, they truly take off their competitive hats. They take off the hats that represent their companies in particular, and they really do what's best for the industry as a whole. Bob and Gary have led the MLS committee for a long time and brought great products forward with Yachtbrokerorg, one of the sponsors of this event. Yachtbroker.org now has about 6,000 boats in the database. It is the only truly industry-owned and official MLS of yachting. So Yachtbroker.org provides you the ability to put all your boats in a central database and bring them back to your websites so that you can display them as you choose to the public. You can also feed several other public-facing advertising sites. You're going to hear about some other products that we are offering and building at IYBA right now. You'll hear about those later on today. But one that you'll hear a lot about through the course of the day is the International Yacht Arbitration Council. IYAC was founded in 2021. The purpose of the IYAC is to provide alternative dispute resolution through arbitration, specifically focused on the yachting industry. So if you had a dispute in years past, we got to go to court. Jeff Cox like that, Rob Maass like that, Michael Moore especially like that. But it's expensive, it's time consuming, and the challenge with going to court is it's highly unlikely that you're going to find someone to preside over a court case that truly understands the yachting industry. So the second alternative was to go to arbitration. In our forms a couple of years ago, we changed our dispute resolution to offer the ability to go to arbitration under the rules of the American Arbitration Association or London Maritime Arbitration Association. American Arbitration is a great platform, it's a great forum, but you may very well have your case heard by a soybean farmer and a textile expert. And they really don't know the pointy end from the square end too often. If you went to London, you got to go see Big Ben and Buckingham Palace and things like that, but it's expensive, it's time consuming, and the process is difficult. It's also, I think last year, was it 1,700 cases that they heard under the London Maritime Arbitration Association? Most of them are focused on cargo ships, insurance situations in the commercial realm. There was no platform really focused on yachting. So we instituted the International Yacht Arbitration Council. It is a corporate entity in the state of Florida. We have 21 certified arbitrators at this time. Mike Karcher, I don't think I saw Mike in the room just yet. Mike has been the guts of the whole enterprise. Mike is well experienced from the Miami Maritime Arbitration Association. He has trained up our first group of certified arbitrators was Carol Wexler, Michael Moore, Rob Maass, Bob Allen, James Jaffa from England, Hein Velema from the Netherlands, Gary Smith, John Burkhart, Jeff Stanley, forgetting a couple, Bob Saxon. Somebody had to be in there to represent the charter crew. I can't think of the other couple that we did certify, but we did 14 on our initial round. And then on September 17th, we added 7 more arbitrators through training. And on December 3rd, we'll bring on 9 more arbitrators. That'll round out our field at 30. And in our IYBA agreements, under paragraph 17, dispute resolution, you will find that IYAC is now named as the default dispute resolution platform in all of your contracts, listing agreements and purchase and sale agreements, and addendums, and trade agreements, trade and addendums as well. And then one of the things that I'm really happy about is that we did a super yacht lawyers forum over in Monaco a couple of weeks ago, and I had no less than a half a dozen attorneys come to me and ask me for the language to be able to incorporate into their agreements. So not only is it in your forms now, but when attorneys are crafting custom documents to negotiate either new builds or big boat deals, they're including IYAC as the dispute resolution platform. So we're really pleased about that. We feel like it will bring a much more expeditious and much more cost-effective platform to the industry to solve disputes. Let's see, what else have we got going on? The EU shows, I had the pleasure of being in Europe. By the way, do me a favor, at 20 minutes after, cut me off, because I'll keep going until 10:30 if you let me. I had the pleasure of being in Europe for the EU shows. Cannes was amazing. We had about 600 boats, 54,000 people. Now, we have 110,000 people here at the Lauderdale show, but Lauderdale's a pretty unique event. Ken was very, very well attended. The electricity in the air was really significant. Monaco followed that 2 weeks later. There were only 95 boats. I think, was it 95, Bob? 95 boats in the show. You could feel it in the air. It was unbelievable. I know one broker in particular who built a new boat. His client built a new boat with a Dutch builder, pushed back an 80-meter boat, pushed back from the table and said, "This is awesome. I'm really excited about it. It's going to take till 2024 till they can deliver this boat. Let's go find another one that exists right now so I got something to ride on." That guy had a nice Saturday. But that was the way it felt at the show the whole time. We had Cafe Milano as our hospitality suite. If ever you have the opportunity to attend any of the shows in Europe through the month of September, I strongly encourage it. It will truly open your eyes to a whole different element of the yachting industry. Lauderdale's no slouch of a place to do business, but it's pretty amazing over there. And through the help of Robert Allen Law, in years past, Willis Towers Watson, hopefully in years forward as well, Trident Trust, Cantiero Rossini, I can't think of the rest of the sponsors that we had, but we had a great group of folks at Cafe Milano, and we provide hospitality for our members from the beginning of the show till the end of the show. So you've got a place to come, have Wi-Fi, do emails, do any kind of work that you need to do, meet with clients, have great food, and good camaraderie and great networking. So the EU shows were a very, very big success this year, and we really look forward to doing them next year. Our EU seminars that will take place in April will also include a golf scramble, and the golf scramble will help us to raise funds to support those efforts over in Europe next year. Membership at IYBA is up, thank goodness. We're at, I think, 1,573 members currently. I get a notice every time somebody makes application. My email goes off quite a lot lately, and we'll have a good round of new members to be approved in our next board meeting, October 21st. So membership is up, and I got to tell you, I've been involved with the association. I joined the association in 1994, but I was 11 years old at the time. But I've been on the board and involved with leadership of the association since 2009. I have never seen a more engaged membership than we have now. Our board is truly engaged in what we do. We've got a great group of 11 that really take what we're doing seriously. They give great support to the initiatives and the agenda items that they bring forward to the board meetings and propose, discuss, and put on the docket to go forward with. So we've got a more active association than we've ever had. The European group is more and more aware of who we are and what we do, and it feels really good to go over there and see them knowing who IYBA is, knowing what our mission is, and wanting to be a part of it. So we're making really good inroads over there. FLIBS, I think you guys may know, the reason we can't find any decent parking here today is because they got a little event taking place here in a couple of weeks for our Lauderdale International Boat Show. It's going to be a great show if the previous few shows that have taken place are any indication. So shine up your topsiders, get your contracts ready. Unfortunately, we're not going to have one of our tools ready that I'll teach you about later on this afternoon in time for the show, but to whet your appetite, you'll see what that's all about. You'll be thinking about it during FLIBS, and hopefully by Miami, well, actually, I would say almost definitely by Miami, you'll have that tool ready to go. That's Boat Docs, and you'll learn about it this afternoon. Jeff, you ready? I'm going to introduce Jeff Cox from Cox Maritime Law. Jeff's going to give us an update on what's going on regulatory-wise. Thanks, Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. Everybody awake and ready to talk about regulations? No. Thanks, Paul, for that. And before I start, I just wanted to say that I am so impressed with the yacht brokerage community. When COVID struck in, March of 2019, there was a period of time where I thought everything was going to come to a screeching halt. And the yacht brokers found a way to continue to show boats, and I've never seen sales like we've seen since then. It's been unbelievable. So everybody, a lot of credit for that. As far as the regulatory updates go, when I was looking into this subject, I looked at an article in Forbes magazine that was written in 2017, and it said that there was 88,899 new regulations from 1995 until 2017, and 4,312 laws. So the difference is between the laws and the regulations. Obviously, the laws are what empower the federal agencies to enact regulations. I saw another article that said that the Government Accounting Office didn't even know how many laws we had or how many agencies there might be enacting regulations. So we have 15 minutes to cover it. The Federal Register has 75,000 pages of fine print per year. And how many minutes left do we have to cover that? Not too many. So what I've done is I've just picked out a few things rather than go through the whole laundry list of everything that's changed. And I'm going to kind of talk about briefly international stuff, federal stuff, and state stuff. The good news is that there hasn't been a ton of changes. A lot of stuff has slowed down, probably as a result of COVID, so there hasn't been as many new regulations coming out constantly. For example, some of the stuff I looked at when I was preparing for this, the International Maritime Organization's last newsletter was over a year ago, so that's dead in the water. The United States Coast Guard was supposed to enact regulations to allow us to flag yachts over 300 gross tons in the United States, and nothing really has happened there. That's been since 2018. So subject matter has been slowed down a little bit. Nonetheless, there's some things that are new and updated, and when I was trying to weed through what to talk about, what not to talk about, I just kind of said, okay, what do these people care about? What do they not care about but should care about? And what can make them money and what can keep them out of trouble? So it's real simple. I'll just jump right in and start with international. Not much that I saw that you should care about, except, you know, Marshall Islands has a new yacht code. They've more or less just updated what they've had and created something more comprehensive. There are some substantive changes, but for the most part, that's targeted towards a limited market and is more technical, not so important for sales necessarily, but it's good to know that it's been updated and around. Some of the international stuff that you probably all have been hearing about would be like your EIPPs. I mean, anybody had a problem with those? I would just suggest that if you're dealing with boats that have engines over 130 kilowatt brake power that were made after 2000, that they are required to have EIPPs. Some people still say, "What is that?" when I mention it to them. It's becoming less common that we don't have them, but I would anticipate enforcement will be picking up on that in the future. So I would just make a note to make sure that your clients have those when boats are put on the market and things like that. They're a pain to get, they're expensive, so just stay on top of that. I made calls to people in the industry that we all know in preparation for this too, and like for example, when I was curious if there's anything going on at Customs that we should know about besides looking at things like the Federal Register, and there's a lot of things that are totally irrelevant to our group that I would see. But so I get on the phone with Customs brokers and ask anything new, anything that this audience really needs to know. And the one thing that stuck out from those conversations was if you're involved with attempting to draw back duty, it is just absolutely delayed beyond belief. And if you have a client that's waiting for a duty drawback, I've heard stories of it taking 2 and 3 years. Another thing that is worth mentioning, David Maass brought this up during the summit, and I'll briefly touch on it, and that is the foreign trade zones. You can't sell retail goods in the foreign trade zone. So we can't close yacht deals in the foreign trade zones. The way out of the foreign trade zone is either import or export. So depending on what the buyer wants to do, that's the path. But you know, we used to be able to do it occasionally where we could actually close in the foreign trade zone, but according to the customs information that's out there and everything, it is not something that we can plan on doing anymore. It's not the end of the world. It's still a good way to bring boats into the country to have them available to be displayed and shown, but we're just not closing them there. So that's important to know, but it's not a critical thing, and it still leaves that tool available if you have a big non-duty paid boat that you'd like to bring in to make it available to be seen. Another federal thing that is out there is that the EPA has its own requirements for engines. So make sure if you're trying to import a boat in the United States that there's the proper decals on the engines that indicate, you know, the emissions and things like that, and that's distinct from MARPOL again. So in some cases you'll have EIAPPs, and you also will need an EPA decal or plate on the engines. In some cases there's a certificate, but not always. That's being enforced now when you try to import a boat. So be aware of that. You know, it would be very awkward to have gone through a closing and bring the boat to the United States and realize that it can't be imported. Not a big deal if the boat's not intended to be imported, but if you are, so be aware of that. You know, look at it ahead of time. When you're looking at a boat to bring in, a lot of us have been going abroad and to Europe to try to find product lately because you guys sold everything that was here already. So some of those boats that are over there, we just have to check that before we go getting all wound up and buying spots on ships and bringing yachts back here if they can't be imported. I mentioned MARPOL. I think that we're going to see more enforcement on the EIPP certificates like I mentioned. From the Coast Guard, good news for our industry is that the IMO Tier 3 engine requirements are not being enforced right now because there is no real product available to put into the boats like this. And this would primarily affect boats like yachts in the 80 to 100 foot range and large sport fishing boats. They simply can't put the equipment into these engine rooms and still have a boat that's worth building. If anybody has a diesel truck, like I have a Ford F-250, and you have to pour this fluid in, which is urea, and to make a long story short, you'd have to carry around large tanks of urea to make this regulatory hurdle. You'd have to have that tank someplace in the engine room to it chemically changes the exhaust. Not to get into the weeds on it, but right now the Coast Guard knows that it's just not equipment that's available to builders, and they would basically cease production of products that were required to have that. And for now, it's not going to be enforced, and it won't be enforced until 2023 or maybe earlier if technology catches up, but right now the regulations are ahead of the technology. So the good news there is you could still perhaps sell a 90-foot sport fish, a new one, and things like that. So that's positive. Crew visas. You can now use a B1 visa for a US flag boat. It doesn't have to be a foreign flag boat anymore. Can't use it if you're going to be doing time charters. So if it's a US flagged, uninspected boat that you use for time charters, that is not going to work for you. But if you're going to do strictly bareboat, that's something to keep in mind. I know it's going into the weeds a little bit, but it's just something, there's just not a lot of new information there. You know, I spoke to some immigration attorneys. You know, the common denominator there was delay, delay, delay. Everything is delayed. So if you have a need for one of your clients to have visa issues, you know, try to stay ahead of it. Everything is very, very delayed. Quickly moving to Florida. Not a ton to report. I would just say that there was a notice that came from the Florida Department of Revenue that says, and actually states the law, that if you use the removal affidavits, your client has 30 days to get all the information regarding the removal of the boat from the state and turn it into the state. I would suggest that you may not want to do that. simply because after a month, if they don't do it or if it falls through the cracks, it can come back to the dealer, and you don't want to be on the hook for sales tax. So I've always said, have your clients get that information to you in 5 days. The boat leaves the state, get the information in right away. Don't wait around for a month because it will get forgotten and you'll be on the hook for the sales tax. So that's not something you necessarily want to do. Another Florida sales and use tax issue that I've heard a little bit about lately, and I just wanted to mention quickly, is as the center console market has expanded and we're seeing more outboard sales, some of the brokers and dealers are running into competition for private sales because the ability to split off the motor from the collection of tax. As brokers and dealers, just understand that the ability to split off to go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and pay tax only on the hull, the use tax is still legally required to be paid on the outboards. And it may be that there's enforcement problems for that right now, but it's not a sound business plan to think that you're going to go around selling outboards without paying use tax on them. They will wise up to that. What else? Oh, the Yacht and Ship Brokers Act. Not a whole lot's changed there, except for that they did repeal one part of it that basically had to do with branch offices. So if you have branch offices, the licensing requirements and the requirement to show the licenses on the walls of each branch office has been changed. And now, basically, to keep it really simple, the employing broker just maintains possession of the salesperson's licenses. That was part of just cleaning up the language in the statute. I don't think there's a ton of substantive changes there, except for it might be just a little bit easier if you have branch offices now. And really, that's really about all I have as far as updates, which I think is a blessing in disguise, given the hour and given how many rules are changing every year. There's just not a lot that I thought was super important for yacht brokers, either to keep you out of trouble or to make you money. There's just not a lot out there. But if anybody has any questions or anything like that, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, I'll move on to our next speaker. Roy.
Set it up for charter and then pay sales tax on the charter? And what are the rules to comply with a charter business under a resale tax number?
So if you want to do that, the problem is that every use of the boat must be a charter. So your client would be stuck chartering the boat. I mean, every time he wanted to use it himself, he'd have to charter, and then he would have to remit the sales tax to the Florida Department of Revenue. So that it's a nightmare as far as paperwork and things like that. I mean, it can be done, but if the boat is truly only to be used for charter, then that is the way to do it. But as far as owning a yacht that you're intending to use personally, I wouldn't recommend it.
Any other questions from the audience? Jeff brought an interesting point forward a moment ago, something that he and I had discussed a few weeks back, and that was regarding tax on outboard engines on used boats. I had a conversation with the Department of Revenue about that. Yes, in fact, you are liable. They even agreed with me that this is silly because what it does is it puts dealers at an unfair disadvantage. We're going to hear in a few minutes a little bit more about our legislative updates. I had a conversation with our lobbyist about that particular subject, and we're going to be taking it up to the Hill in Tallahassee to see if we can't get some relief from that.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want your clients to feel like they're at a disadvantage because they're working through a broker or a dealer, and they're truly not. And if they think that they're going to do that, they're probably intending to evade the use tax, which is a problem. So.
And they've all got information on the interwebs, so they think they know it all.
Registration in Delaware, is that loophole finally closed or not?
I'm sorry?
The registration in Delaware.
Registration in Delaware?
Yeah, so registering a vessel in Delaware and actually keeping it here in Florida. I was told that it finally closed and that's not even possible anymore, but I do have clients that continue to do it.
I'm not sure I understand exactly the loophole that you're referring to. You can still register a boat in Delaware, you can still bring it to Florida, but if you keep it here long enough to trigger our sales and use tax laws.
But I was told that actually Delaware was the one that was now requiring boats to either be there or, not be there, but have them registered there, and actually, they wouldn't be able to be in Florida. That's what I was told. That's
In
not
my
the case.
experience, Delaware will register a banana peel floating in a bucket of water. So, yeah. No.
Any other questions? Oh, hang on a second. I'm coming, Aaron. Didn't wear my running shoes today.
I just wanted to clarify what the gentleman in the front was saying. Jeff, you may not have heard, but they're requiring in Delaware people to attest to the fact that under penalty of perjury, that Delaware is the primary place of use of the vessel that you're registering there. So we've stopped using Delaware for that reason.
That's,
For our clients.
yeah, you would obviously would want to do that then. We don't register boats in Delaware very often. There's very seldom a need to do that. And typically, I mean, the only scenario that we see where we even consider a Delaware registration is if we're talking about a tender that's perhaps never been registered anyplace, and Florida won't take it without some kind of a previous registration. So we'll register in Delaware for 5 minutes and then transfer to Florida. But with that attestation now, I don't know that we would do that anymore. So. Yeah.
Actually, a lot of dealers in Central America
Hang on a second.
will create the company there.
Wait a second.
So usually is clients that lived in Central America, and not only the clients, but the dealers for a lot of the brands in Central America, they actually create the companies under Delaware, sell them instead of selling the vessel. So that's what we
Right.
gonna have. Guatemala is gonna be the number one, that every single client that we have from there actually register in Delaware, and they think that's still possible, but you're right, ma'am. That's the perjury side I think they don't care about.
Yeah, we would sometimes see problems with boats that we're finding internationally where tenders aren't required to be registered. And our typical motivation is to get it registered in Florida as soon as possible, because then we can act to keep it current for our clients, where with Delaware, it would go to a third party. So if we can use Florida, it's much better. There's very little advantage to going with Delaware if you're going to actually have the boat in Florida. So, yeah.
I've got one here in the back, Jeff.
One in the back.
Hello.
Hello.
Have you run into, so this is like a specific question. So there's the outboard Yamaha 350s. They had a little issue a couple years ago, and when you change the flywheel, the ECM gets, the hours get reset. So have you gone through this situation where the boat gets sold, you say there's under 500 hours, but really there's about 1,000 hours. Everybody did their due diligence, tried to see how many hours there actually were, but then you kind of run into the truth later on. Do we need to worry about that?
You need to worry about it if you're making representations about it. If you don't know the hours on the boat and you're just throwing numbers out there, I would not do that.
Well, the hours show on the boat, but when they get reset, sometimes we have to take the seller's word for it, and that's like a gray area. Sorry.
Well, I would suggest that as a broker, you should make sure that your contracts are clear, that any information that you're giving is, based on the information, your best understanding of the information that's out there, but you can't represent that. I know in vehicle sales, there's odometer statements and things like that, but I'm not sure if there's something exactly analogous in outboard motor engine hours, but, just as a general rule, you shouldn't be making these kinds of representations. That's the kind of thing that can lead to litigation, and it doesn't work out well.
Full disclosure.
Yeah, I mean, you can't disclose everything because you don't know everything.
Any other questions from the audience?
Oh, we got one, Roy.
Hang on.
As a Florida broker selling a boat in another state, in my case, one is in the Great Lakes, the other one is in the Chesapeake. What obligation do we have on collecting sales tax in each of those states? In one case, the boat will stay in the Great Lakes. The other case, it'll cruise everywhere.
So as a Florida broker, what you want to make sure you have is a closing statement and something in your file, like a protocol of delivery that indicates where the delivery of the boat took place. So as long as you have that, you can, if you have a protocol on your file that says the boat was delivered in New York or some other state, then if you're later audited by the Department of Revenue and they see that, you're not going to come looking at you for the sales tax. So just make sure you have something in your file like that. I suggest a closing statement and a protocol of delivery.
Hang on, Gary.
I think he was asking what obligations may you have in that state?
Well, that would, I mean, state by state, and that would, the obligation there would be the buyer of the boat. If you take possession of a boat in a state, if you actually close in the state, you may well have triggered sales tax at that point. So oftentimes what we'll do in those situations is arrange for an offshore delivery so that we don't actually close in the state. Otherwise, you'd be running around trying to comply with the laws of every state that, and something that happens and something that you should stay aware of as brokers is when the contract has a delivery location in another state, I would make a point of adding an option for the buyer to take delivery offshore right in the contract, right at the outset. Because we've had situations where brokers, send a contract around, it gets all signed up, deliveries in Alabama, and we get hired after acceptance, and now I'm staring at a contract where we're bound to close in Alabama, and some states don't have cap sales tax at this point, and you could be looking at a very large number that your buyer now has to pay just because of that one simple thing on a contract that you might not have looked at carefully. So just take a look at that and make sure that if it's not in Florida, that you have for delivery location in the preamble of, say, the IYBA agreement, Florida or offshore at buyer's option or some language to that effect. That way, if the buyer later decides he doesn't want to keep the boat in Alabama, he's not going to pay the Alabama sales tax, for example. He's not looking at $50,000, $100,000 in sales tax. So. What else?
Jeff, I think that's a wrap.
All right.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Following Jeff is Nick Matthews. Nick is with Becker, formerly Becker and Poliakoff. Nick is with our lobbying group, and he's going to give us an update on Chapter 326 and other goings-on on Capitol Hill.
Thank you, Paul, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone. Again, as Paul stated, my name is Nick Matthews. I'm a lobbyist with the Becker firm, just out of Fort Lauderdale here. We are actually Fort Lauderdale, well, we say this, I don't think anyone's fact-checked this in a while. We're the largest Fort Lauderdale headquartered law firm. I'm going to say it until someone corrects me. Just as a quick introduction, we've been in the area for about 50 years, full-service law firm. I'm out of our government practice, focusing largely on issues local to South Florida and Tallahassee. And my colleague, Ellen Bogdanoff, who's a shareholder at the firm, is in Tallahassee now working on some of our issues. So we kind of divided and conquered. So I'm happy to be here this morning. I think it's kind of helpful that the group kind of understand where we are in space and time with respect to the state legislative process. As you've been just reminded, you are regulated at every level of government, and God bless the state of Florida, they're no different. So it's interesting to know, or it's important to know, that the state legislature convenes, they are required to convene once a year for 60 days every year. That is a constitutional obligation. That is the only time in which legislation can be passed and approved and ultimately sent to the governor for approval or a veto. The funny thing is, you hear about probably half the time it's wacky ideas that you're going, why the heck are they doing this? And then half the time you're hearing great stuff that they're doing. But the only obligation your Florida legislature has under the Constitution is to pass a budget, and a balanced one. They could literally go up there and only do things with respect to the budget and leave, but that's obviously not what they do. They file close to over 1,000 bills every year. And this year we are anticipating a piece of legislation that'll impact the industry for the better. So that's why I'm here today. On January 11th, the legislative session will convene, and it'll go for 60 days from there. I think, there we go. I think, it's kind of important to understand why this matters to the association. Like I said before, there is only a 60-day window to pass meaningful legislation that impacts your industry. That is with any piece of legislation typically needing to pass 3 committees of reference in both chambers, the House and the Senate. So it's got to go through 3 committee stops, get into session, and then get voted on the floor by a majority vote in both chambers, and then sent to the governor, and you've got to pull that all off really in 60 days. And it's designed to be difficult and make sure that only the best ideas survive, which we can probably debate. On top of the process being naturally difficult to survive and kind of navigate, members of the legislature are limited on how many bills they can file. They only schedule committee meetings a certain amount of times. So if you don't get on a regulated industries committee agenda and they're not meeting again, well, you're kind of dead in the water. And like everything else, you are competing with major evolving topical issues that may come up. And just kind of as a few references, since I've been active, you've had massive hurricanes that gobble up big pieces of the budget and insurance issues associated with that. Sadly, school violence was a major issue and kind of something close to folks here in Broward. So the civil rights issues sucked up a lot of oxygen out of the air the last couple of years. The years when the budget is down, that makes everything difficult. So that's the kind of path we are trying to thread here. The good thing is I can report that the #1 policy issue to the IYBA is incredibly well positioned for this legislative session. It is still relatively early in the process, and we've had some very high-level conversations, and we've really scrubbed out what we think is a really good piece of legislation. It's in draft form now. It'll change. It'll evolve. It'll go through the committee process, as I just described. And what we're going to attempt to do is to protect kind of integrity and professionalism in the brokerage industry here, in the yacht broking industry. And what we want to do is kind of update this statute. We had some high-level conversations with Senate and House leadership, professional committee staff, the attorneys and the staff that really help make things possible in the legislature, and they expressed concern about moving regulation of the industry in a way that could be perceived as increasing regulation. That's not the posture of this Florida legislature. That is not something that this governor is going to support, is something that thinks it's going to be even harder, significantly more bureaucratic hurdles to getting into the game and conducting business in Florida. You folks who live in Florida or familiar with the state know our governor, Governor DeSantis, is very much wanting at all costs to make Florida an attractive place to do business. So it's kind of, that's the sandbox we're playing in. So we were tasked with kind of more of an updating of the statute as opposed to some overwhelming master comprehensive reorganization or kind of new regulatory scheme. And very briefly, like I said, the bill's in a draft concept now, but we want to create a definition for this visiting brokers, which would require them to conduct business with and transact with a licensed broker in the state. We're updating the definition of yacht to match, I think it's a federal definition that we're trying to match there. I think 2 really important pieces here are eliminating the 90-day temporary brokerage license. This was in statute. The Department of Business and Professional Regulation was issuing 90-day temporary licensures while the background information came back, and that kind of defeats the purpose of doing a really comprehensive background check if you can go conduct business in 90 days and then run off into the sunset after you do a deal, I guess. And I think the 2 other important things are adding the requirement that you've been party to 4 transactions before licensure or getting 20 credits of continuing education credits. I think it's going to just beef up a little bit of the professionalism where it may be needed in the industry. And then lastly, giving the department an actual mechanism to investigate and take some sort of corrective action, I think is really big. Right now, there really isn't a ton of enforcement being done at the state level at all. And now we've put in a requirement in statute that kind of activity, we've required the department to do that. So this I just mentioned a moment ago. We really wanted kind of a self-regulatory approach, but the powers that be kind of thought what we were putting in place kind of could be perceived as an expansion and kind of a whole new level of regulation, and that's the kind of thing we wanted to avoid. So where we stand in a great position. Like I said, session starts in January. We've got a few more committee weeks, and one of the most important things you can have in a legislative process is really good bill sponsors. Like I said before, a bill's got to pass the House and the Senate, so you need a Senate sponsor and a House sponsor. I'm happy to report a very good friend of mine, Rep. Chip LaMarca, who we're probably in his district right now. If any of you know Representative Chip LaMarca, is a Republican member of the House. He represents, I think it's all the way from Port Everglades up to the county line, largely coastal district. I'm confident no one has more marine activity in their district in the entire state than Rep. LaMarca. So someone who is really close to us and really close to these issues. And then our Senate sponsor is Ed Hooper, another Republican over on the West Coast, who has a largely coastal district as well. So I think that's important that these folks have a lot of marine activity, yacht activity in their districts. So it's something that they can see, feel, and touch on a regular basis and kind of understand how important it is. So that, as I mentioned, the bill will be filed here maybe this week, and it'll pop out and it's going to go through committee process. It changes at each stop. So through your membership, through Paul, who's done an incredible job. Paul, please communicate concerns as you do with us on that bill, and we'll stay on top of it. We feel confident we can get this passed, and look, it's a first step. This is a very deliberate legislative body. If we move something this session, we can demonstrate that it was well thought out. It didn't create some massive regulatory scheme that made business even harder to do, but it just really brought some integrity and a little bit of transparency to the industry. We're set up for the next couple of years to come back with some more nips and tucks that really help protect the industry, and that's our intention. So that's where we are. And as I mentioned early on, my colleague Ellen is up in Tallahassee now, and Paul, she is having active conversations this week on that tax issue. And we'll report back with whether there's a legislative fix, maybe an agency fix, but we are on top of that issue. But it's kind of evolving, and we'll bring back something to your membership here shortly. And that was really all I wanted to walk you through, was the legislative process and give you kind of understanding where we stand.
Not that Ellen likes to make sure things are on track, but she was just texting me to make sure that you were doing okay up there.
Okay.
And I just wanted to give a little clarity. I'm going to back up in a second here, but I want to give a little clarity on one point that Nick made when he mentioned 4 transactions before the issuance of a license. So as it stands right now, if you have $500 in a pulse, you qualify to be a yacht broker. If you don't have any active felony warrants, I think it gives them 90 days to check that out. So you could do your deal and then be carted off to Stark or wherever it is that you really should be. So what has happened previously is that in order to qualify for a license, $500 in a pulse, you get your license, an employing broker signs off, says, yep, the guy's going to work for me. And then you sit in front of your calendar and you mark off 730 days. And after you're done marking off 730 days, you send a new application into the state that says, I now want to be an employing broker. And now you have the keys to the kingdom. Now you run the escrow accounts, now you run the whole enchilada. That's really not much of a bar, if you will, to demonstrate your professional ability and protect consumers in the transactions of yacht sales. So what we decided to do is, first thing that we wanted to do, as Nick mentioned, we are in a deregulatory environment. We brought a 5-point white paper to the governor and had a nice dinner with him and talked about the things that we'd like to do. There were a couple of us were there. Jason, were you in the room with that one? No? There were, we had, you should have been. We'd still be in the room. But you'd have him beat him into submission by now. We gave him a 5-page white paper that said basically what we'd like to do is enhance consumer protections. We'd like to do that by increasing the level of professionalism in our industry. And how would we like to go about that? We'd like to require some training. We'd like to require some testing. We'd like to require some continuing education units. It doesn't have to be a ridiculous bar to meet, but it needs to be at least as good as the real estate industry. They're self-regulated, and they're required to do that in order to have a license. We also wanted to allow visiting brokers to come into the state, as Nick had mentioned, and we wanted to change the upper limit from 300 tons. In 1987, when this legislation was written, 300 tons was huge. Oh my God, a boat of 300 tons. Now tenders are 300 tons to big boats. And it's kind of ludicrous that a guy selling a 40-meter yacht is not required to have a license. So this is what we proposed to him. He said, yeah, lovely ideas. You guys are great salesmen, but not going to happen. We're in a deregulatory environment. Have a nice day, which indicated that we needed to go legislatively. Enter Nick and Ellen. So Nick and Ellen are working on our behalf on Capitol Hill with our legislators, Chip LaMarca and other sponsors to our bills. And what we're trying to do in that specific instance of requiring 4 transactions, in order to transition from a salesman to a broker, you have to either demonstrate that you've been intimately involved in 4 transactions from listing to closing and be signed off on that, or demonstrate that you've accumulated 20 continuing education units. So how do you get CEUs? Those in this room right now that qualify for CEUs are gaining 7 CEUs. The attorneys here will tell you that to sit in a room for 1 day and get 7 CEUs is pretty strong medicine. That's pretty good accumulation. So we're not asking for ridiculous standards. We're not asking for something impossible. We just want to offer an ability to protect consumers, raise the bar of professionalism, and be recognized as a profession, not an industry. Not looked at as a bunch of guys, used car salesmen that operate out of the back seats of their cars. So that I wanted to clarify. We do have an opportunity for any questions that the audience may have for Nick. He's up on the Hill. He knows what's going on in other issues as well. Is there anything legislatively or politically that you guys would like to know about? I knew there'd be something. Come on, Mark.
Well, since you guys are working with 2 legislators that, clearly you've got an established relationship, there's a lot of waterway north of those 2 districts. I'm thinking New Smyrna Beach, St. Augustine, Jacksonville area. Are there representatives where we've got relationships in those districts that, we should go to somebody and get them tied into your program?
Absolutely. I mean, we're proud to have relationships across the state. I mean, honestly, that's why we're an asset, I think, to the association. There'll be a time for that. Right now, we're doing our blocking and tackling. We've got to get a bill file drafted. Professional staff in the legislature needs to make sure it kind of meets legal sufficiency, get it filed. And then the next step is it has to be assigned those 3 committees of reference I was mentioning. And typically it's 3 regulated industries. It's a regulated industry you're in, maybe transportation, maybe, it depends what industry committees we get assigned. And then we immediately go to work looking at the membership on those committees to make sure we've got votes in all those committees to get it through. And that usually starts with the chair of those committees. And then we start finding allies, people that we know would be sympathetic to us to, in an ideal world, we get them to co-sponsor the legislation so that that bill shows up at a committee, there's a yes vote banked for it already on paper, and then the rest of the committee can see, there's already 4 co-sponsors on here, this thing's cooked, we're good to go. But that's what we do. We do all that ahead of time so that your committee hearing on your priority piece of legislation, there is no questions and there's almost no debate. That's the ideal scenario. Everyone on that committee, whether they're natural allies or not, is up to speed and informed on what we're doing, and we've met with them, answered all their questions and whatever bonkers idea they want to add to it, because that's what happens a lot is you get someone with some crazy idea, this would be a great vehicle to add this thing my neighbor was telling me about to. Well, no, this isn't the bill to add your idea from your neighbor. But that's all part of the process. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, vetting is a big piece of the puzzle right now, and discussing how we make this legislation attractive to our supporters.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention something that I ran across when I was preparing for my presentation earlier, and that has to do with the definition of a yacht. The statute in Florida has the definition of a yacht as a vessel that weighs more than 300 tons, whereas the regulation that was enacted uses the gross tonnage of 300 as defined by the Coast Guard. So there's a disconnect there that needs to be addressed. Obviously, the weight of a boat is not the tonnage of a boat, and that's something that the drafters of this may not have noticed when they went through it, but at least this is an opportunity to fix that.
Absolutely, and we're working on it. We have a draft definition, and we struck the reference to the weight altogether, the tonnage, and I'll read it here. It's yacht means any vessel which is propelled by sail or machinery in the water which exceeds 32 feet in length and this is the new part here, the underlined part, is manufactured, operated, leased, rented, or chartered for recreational use, period. Struck the tonnage reference in that regard.
That's good, because as Paul mentioned, it's absurd that if you're dealing with a yacht that's 400 gross tons, that there's no need for a license. Yep. Obviously, your need would increase, not decrease at that point. So
the draft as now takes that into account.
Good. All right, and then if you get your draft done, then the mistake will be fixed, but the statute with the weight reference is nonsense. It needs to be fixed.
Okay.
I think that's what our bill does, is modifies the statute, correct?
Yes, this is the definition of yacht in statute.
So that's the delicate balance that we had to walk, Jeff, in that definition, because if a boat, if you're going to go buy a 50-meter Benetti and ride around on it with you and your buddies, you and Jason are going to go cruising, then it's one thing. But if you want to put it in charter, now we've got some commercial considerations. But if you're in commercial considerations, you don't want to affect, cargo ships, tankers, things of that nature. So the reason we use the term recreational is because if you're chartering the boat, it still can be considered a recreational or pleasure use. So these are the kinds of things that you come up with when you're dealing with statute and you're dealing with regulation, that you have to be, as lawyers know, very, very deliberate and specific in your language so that you don't trip yourself up. That's the whole idea. Any other questions? You got the inside track to Tallahassee right here on the front at a discounted rate. We're paying.
Wait, what?
Hang on a second.
We had some things at the committee level that didn't really make it in there, and I wanted to bring it up. I know Paul and I talked about this at length, and it never seems to get much traction. But when we're talking about a visiting broker, and we need to strengthen the language, and I hope we have the opportunity to do that when it comes to just having to do business with a Florida broker. So we all know how that's going to end up. It's going to be a guy in Delaware comes down here to sell a boat. He's got a friend that works in Lauderdale. He's going to give him $50 to say you went through him. And also, so it negates the ability or the reason to have a Florida license. It also further could be construed that our salespeople in my company don't need a license either. I have a license. They can piggyback me because they're doing business with a Florida licensed broker. We talked about in committee saying that it had to be a Florida licensed broker who was the listing broker. That was shot down a bit, but that was my idea, that I thought that would strengthen it. The biggest problem is what I just mentioned, and the second biggest problem is a guy out of state not having the rules and regulations about holding the bonded escrow account. Now we've got a seller of a boat or a buyer of a boat down here that's not protected. We don't even know for sure if he's really got a deposit. Those are the kind of things that we were trying to strengthen that didn't really seem to make it into the final version there. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, I don't think we're at final version either, are
Correct.
we, Nick? We have to pitch it to them, absolutely. So where we are right now, Gary, and I want to say thanks to Andy Miles and Trevor Carroll for having spearheaded this effort, along with a couple of other board members who have been participatory in it. There is still language that needs to be vetted and gone through in our committee before it goes to legislative committees. That's one of the things that we do need to pay a little bit more attention to, is strengthening that definition.
Certainly.
And creating a situation where the Florida licensed broker is not only required to be involved in the deal, but he has to have some strength in the deal, some direction of the deal, and some accountability if something were to go awry. Yeah, he has to really be in the deal. He can't be a a $50 next door neighbor.
Yeah, and just.
I'm sorry, Mike, but you're not going to be able to make a living doing that.
And to be clear, when we get this bill filed, there will be a minimum of 8 opportunities to amend it in committee. And that's where you get a bill filed, it goes to committee, anyone on that committee can bring an amendment forward to tweak it, to fix it, and that's part of our process. Each different committee is gonna have different professional staff. You're gonna have folks, if we have to go to insurance and banking, I don't know why we would, those folks are gonna see it from that angle. And the next committee, if it's regulated industries, they're gonna come from a state agency perspective. And then the last committee's transportation, I'm just throwing it, those folks come with a different mindset. So there's the way it gets filed, I am confident will not be the final version of the bill when it's all said and done. And we have a say in that. Our sponsors are filing on our behalf and with us, so we'll have an opportunity to keep scrubbing it through the process. That is, unintended consequences are a major concern, and the deliberate process that this legislative body insists on is designed to limit that as best we can. So.
Right side of the room's been kind of quiet this morning. We don't have any questions from over here? More coffee on this side of the room, please.
And Paul, let me add one more thing. If at the end of the day, we're forced into a position on a piece of legislation we really don't love, we talk to our sponsors and say, guys, this isn't where we wanted to be. Pull the bill. Like, we bit off more than we can chew, or we don't like, that's part of it too. We have that opportunity. We don't want that to happen. That almost, when we're doing our jobs well, that's unlikely. But if at the end of the day, we're looking at something that turns around and is bad for the industry, we will make sure we don't bring that through the process.
So there's more opportunity for us to bring it at the board level for continued review. Other questions? Got one right here.
This might be a bit of a curly one, but is there anything in the air about boat license for operators that may come down the pike? I see there's been 25% increase in boating deaths with the increase in people buying boats. People just going out, they don't know right from wrong, port or starboard.
I imagine that is the type of thing that gets, someone files a bill, a member of the legislature wants to take on boating safety each year. There's bills every year aimed at that. That type of, this legislature for the last, honestly, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, every year there's a massive bill that deregulates professions and industries and trainings and requirements. I don't think that there's going to be a bill that comes in and significantly increases any types of boater education or training or requirements to get just an average boating license. I don't think. It's just not in the DNA of this legislature.
No other questions? Nick, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate
it.
the update. I'm going to invite the inimitable Jason Dunbar to the stage to give us a little sense of what's going on in yachting. Thanks, Jason.
Okay. Glasses. Wait a minute, I think I left my glasses. Paul asked me to speak on the state of our industry. Unbelievable. Thank you very much. No, seriously, it does feel kind of like I'm being asked to, like I'm like I'm in the chess industry asking to speak on that after the Queen's Gambit or something like that. I mean, those guys were in a 50-year coma and woke up in a disco. These analogies are great. They work wonderfully to get an idea of how great things are going. But if we want to cut through that, we got to use data. And my friends over here at the IYBA, they know I love data. And that data can cut through a lot of the analogies. We use our friends at Yachtworld, the NMMA. They give us a bunch of industry data that we can use to find out and gain a sense of exactly how we're doing. And let's start with some repeatable data that most of us in the room have access to, soldboats.com. This gives a great macro view of our economics and how we're doing. And it's clearly not a representation of all the sales, but Sold Boats is input into an MLS that at least has been consistent for about 15 years as far as who's using it. So it does give us a metric that we can use. And if we look globally at sales, just the volume of sales, if you take 2015 through 2019, and you look at how much input was put into that system, it averaged about 55,000 boats a year would be put into soldboats.com for that 5-year period. When we look at 2020 to 2021, we're looking at about 62,000 boats a year. This is approximately 7,000 more boats a year being sold in that five-year period. So this gives us a metric of a 13% increase over a period of 20 months. So that's 13% rise in the data that's put in there. It's a good metric to use. I think another great metric to use would be to just kind of calibrate the state of our industry would be the publicly traded stock in those companies that are in the business of our industry, the sale of new and used boats. And so if we look at two of them, our friends at MarineMax and OneWater, whose ticker symbols are HCO and ONEW, if we apply those same time frame metrics to that industry and we look at how they've been doing, if you take, for example, HCO or MarineMax, and you look at 2015 to 2019, you'll find that their stock kind of floated plus or minus 18 bucks a share. Then you go and you take that same stock and you look at it from February of 2020 to today, plus or minus $48 a share. It kind of floats in that arena. OneWater's had the same meteoric rise in their stock since February of 20. This represents a 260% increase in the value of our business. This incredible increase in these companies is not based just on sales alone. I'm sure these guys had mergers, acquisitions. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you have to quantify to understand that type of an increase in their value. But it is a metric that we can use. And that increase in their value shows demand has gone up. And demand is a very, very important word for our business. Supply and demand. It's when you go from the theory of supply and demand to the law, you've made it into big times, and it is a law. And there's a lot of people in here that have been doing this longer than I have. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I know there's people in here that have much surpassed me, and we have always lived and died by demand. That is the big, big part of our industry. When in 2002 to 2007, when the banks were loaning money on credit, people were borrowing, had boatloads of money, demand was high, our industry was sky high. The minute that credit line crashed, our industry crashed with it. The banks have changed course. They're now doing loans mostly on collateral instead of credit. So the buyers have a lot of skin in the game, and there's a very low probability that Bob's company is going to become the largest brokerage firm one day because the repos just may not be there like they are. Very important industry, but I don't know that it's going to be the largest brokerage house in the business. We clawed our way out of that recession in 15, and we made it to this point right now. And that brings me to the second half, and really the point of the state of our industry. I had to think this through about really what are we going through right now? And I can't remember supply ever having such a significant role in the state of our industry. Bob Saxon touched on it in the opening remarks. Supply has played such a benign role because the product we sell, it doesn't go anywhere. Fiberglass, it doesn't rot, it doesn't rust. This stuff just doesn't go away. We've never had a problem with it. I remember nitwits. I think it's that 1960 Hatteras. I'm walking down the boat show in Miami Boat Show in 2016. There it is, 60 years after it comes out of the mold. It looks brand new. We've never had a supply problem. But today, that is a problem. It's affecting our industry. And back to Yachtworld. According to their statistics, and I like this stuff, 56% of their leads right now in Yachtworld are first-time boat buyers. The NMMA is reporting that the number of female buyers has increased 75% since 2020. This is good stuff. These are two new groups that have just increased the demand on our product. And we don't have the supply to satisfy these groups. And I got to be honest with you, I can't even believe these words are about to come out of my mouth, but it's highly probable that people in this room have sold boats 2 or 3 years ago, and you can look at your customer and say it's worth more now than it was when you sold it to them. And that's just a phrase for those of us that have been doing this, that you're trying to sell an appreciating asset, and boats historically have been a depreciating asset. And so where are we? We're in this surreal world. And in this increase in business, a lot of brokerage firms have increased their sales staff by 20 or 30% to meet this demand. We have a new problem because I challenge anybody to find a service department that has increased its staff by 20 or 30% to meet that demand. It's like zero. We're not only short on the supply of boats, but we seem to be short on the supply of our service and parts industry. This is an industry that's now having an adverse effect on our ability to meet the needs and expectations of these customers. And the NMMA again tells us that 40% of all first-time boat owners will get completely out of boating after 3 to 5 years. I think the brokerage community has been handed this incredible opportunity with these new boat owners. We've got a whole new jug of fuel to keep selling boats for the future. And if we want to keep these newbies on the water, I think it's our brokerage industry's job to meet and honestly discuss these expectations with them. It's our job to let them know that the parts may not be on the shelf right now. It's our job to let them know that the mechanic that they need to fix their boat, he might take a month to get to your boat or two. This is something that's very important for us to convey to our customers. And one of the, I think one of the tea leaves that we can also read, using sold boats, just to kind of give an example of how we're doing at managing these expectations. If we, instead of taking that 30,000-foot view, if we look at exactly what's going on right now, we take a year over, 2020, and 2021, according to Yachtworld, sales are down 3% over 2020. So we've just started a downward trend. NMMA tells us that 6.7% less people registered boats in 2021 than 2020. So registrations are down, sales are down. That could be just a natural course correction. It might be. It might be. Or it could be because getting a brand new small boat takes 2 years. A big boat takes 4 years. When your small boat arrives, you've got to wait 4 months for the outboard to show up. This isn't exactly what people want. There could be other issues also affecting our industry. And this reduction, this small course reduction. And insurance premiums are rising. And I think this is an important one because anybody here that was at the sales summit in 2020 and 2021 will remember what Rick Salway of Great American Insurance Group and Scott Stamper of Atlas told us. We had a 50-year run where there was about 26 underwriters for them to choose from. I think we're down to 4. They warned us that there are real problems coming down the insurance pipe. This is an elephant in the room. I really got to be honest with you. I don't even want to talk about it because the days of 1.5% to 2%, we may be on the 5% world of insurance premiums now. Dockage rates. Dockage rates are also something that is becoming a problem for our first-time boaters. It's given our long-time boaters heartburn too, of the cost of parking a boat. And these costs are now on the verge of taking the blue-collar boater and boxing them out, and that's probably not a good thing. We've never had more headwinds against us in certain areas like insurance and dockage and supply. And all of these are affecting the state of our industry. But if you look at the state of our industry and you want to ask yourself, is it good? I don't know that that's the right word to use. I don't know that good is the right word. I think by all measurable data, we are in a historic time. It is historically good. We may look back at these times as the greatest expansion in our industry and the history of it since the 50s. There's nothing been like what we've seen. But if we want to maintain this level of commerce, if we want to keep these boaters in for the foreseeable future, and we want to stop that 40% getting out of boating from increasing, if we want that number to keep going down, it's going to be on us. We've got the real state of our industry is meeting expectations, these challenges to thoughtfully, intelligently tell our customers that, you know, you're just going to have to put some duct tape on that anchor hatch that keeps flapping up and go boating. You just want to find a way to let them know that there are going to be problems. That is the state of our industry, but it is still these problems that they have on their boat. You're never going to find a better way to find a peace of mind than out on a boat. And plus, there's 75% more females out there, so that's a good thing. And that would be the state of our industry. Thank you.
Well, from top to bottom, that was fantastic information. I especially wanted to point out a couple of things that Jason mentioned about the state of our industry and meeting expectations. Boy, that nailed it. That could be a whole seminar on its own. I understand there's a couple of European yards where they're not even taking any new orders right now, and a couple of European yards where they're backed up 5 to 7 years on orders. And so bringing back the service and supply and the warranty and all those other things into place is great points made by Jason. I want to talk about a real quick success story. I manage a 130-foot Westport, as a matter of fact, Westport, and conversations with the owner not long ago. He maxed out his charter calendar under a Marshall flag, and here's a guy that 5 years ago wanted out. He wanted out of the industry. And we got him situated, got him straightened out and all that, and he told me the other day, his out-of-pocket. In other words, he uses the yacht himself 10 or 12 weeks a year. He charters is maxed out under Marshall. And his out-of-pocket, June to June, was a little over $10,000, meaning less than $1,000 a month to own this beautiful yacht, have it in a business, do all the things that are consistent with that, and also be very, very happy about his yachting experience. And another thing that's happening now is because of the lack of inventory, is chartering. I saw Daphne here, and chartering is just red hot right now. It's as rare, I mean, it's blown the top off the industry over the past, from what we've seen at its peak. And chartering, Paul, should I say it? No? No, I don't want to say it. Okay. All right. Then you can, yeah, 78%. Camper Nicholson's, and we did a Super Yacht Index years ago when I was at Campers, and you've heard me say it before. It's something I'm really, really proud of. It's astounding that 78% of people who buy or build a yacht have chartered at least once. And so if your company's not involved in chartering or getting your customers turned on to chartering and all that, you're missing the beat there somehow. Now, go ahead, Paul. 93% of all statistics are made up. Very true. Touche. Okay, I'm going to send you to break now. We're going to take about 15, 20 minutes. Go have a cup of coffee, catch up on your cell phone calls, and other things you need to tend to, and we'll call back to order. Just be diligent, 20 minutes maximum, okay? Maximum. Thank you.